Think about it for a second. You make a choice, you pull the lever, sign the contract, whatever it is. But what happens after that? And I don't mean tomorrow. I mean next month, next year, or, a full decade from now. Every single choice we make sets off this invisible domino effect, a total cascade of consequences that most people never see coming until it's entirely too late.
So, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are basically upgrading your brain's operating system. We're going to completely transform the way you approach problems, shifting you away from that reactive, gut-level problem solving and giving you an actual strategic cognitive superpower. We are talking about mastering the art of second-order thinking, exactly how it works, why it's surprisingly rare, and how you can use it to see way past the obvious.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, the first-order trap. Fast but deeply flawed. So, most people just rely on first-order thinking. It's fast, it's intuitive, and it solves the immediate problem right in front of you, without really forcing you to examine what comes next. Take conventional investing, for example. First-order thinking says, well, the outlook is favorable, so the stock is going to go up. Makes sense, right? But the problem is, literally everyone else reaches that exact same conclusion, leaving you with absolutely zero competitive edge. Second-order thinking works completely differently. It actually demands that you mechanically map out the cascade of hidden consequences. It forces you to ask the hard questions. Who is buying? What are their expectations? And what happens when those expectations inevitably shift?
Here's a really stark historical example that perfectly illustrates the danger of staying stuck on that first level. A government decides to arm some quote-unquote moderate rebels for a quick short-term geopolitical gain. Now that's a classic first-order win. The immediate problem is solved. But the second-order disaster? They end up fighting those exact same armed groups for decades. A seemingly simple, fast decision created a massive, compounding catastrophe, all because the decision-makers completely ignored the cascade of consequences.
Let's move on to Section 2, Mastering Second-Order Thinking. Time to start mapping those consequences. Okay, so how do we actually do this in real life? How do we stop playing checkers and start playing chess with our decisions? The single most powerful tool you can develop is building a Pavlovian response to high-stakes decisions by repeatedly asking yourself three very simple words. And then what? You make a move. And then what? They react. And then what? You have to mechanically map out the compounding consequences across multiple time frames to truly, deeply understand the choice you're making. To map these consequences effectively, we look across three horizons. So, first order focuses on the immediate, obvious result. Second order targets near-term hidden consequences. And third order, that tracks long-term compounding outcomes. The crucial takeaway here is that a lot of extraordinary outcomes in business are actually first-order negative, but second-order positive. Basically, they require short-term friction or pain for a massive long-term gain, a reality that first-order thinkers completely miss because they just jump ship way too early. All right, Section 3, Finding the Ground Truth, Updating Your Map. Listen, to accurately answer "and then what?", you absolutely must be operating in reality. Remember that mental models are just maps. They're useful simplifications of a highly complex world. But when you mistake the map for reality, you stop questioning your assumptions. Jeff Bezos actually had a great moment with this. He once discovered that while his company's internal data, the map, showed customer wait times were under 60 seconds, real customers on the phone were actually waiting over 10 minutes. The map lied. When reality conflicts with your map, reality must always win. You have to update your map, not your perception of the facts. 2%. I want you to just stop and stare at this for a second. When Elon Musk was looking to build rockets, industry convention, the existing map of the time, said rockets were astronomically expensive. There was no way around it. But by breaking the problem down, he discovered that the raw materials themselves only cost about 2% of a rocket's market price. Everything else? It was literally just inherited assumptions and conventional limits. What Musk used there is called first principles thinking. It's stripping away what is merely assumed to find what is absolutely, undeniably true. And this allows you to completely reframe common assumptions. So instead of thinking all good ideas are taken, you realize new combinations are always possible. Instead of thinking we must move first, you realize that being better often heavily beats being first. First principles thinking just completely dismantles inherited limitations by breaking problems down to their irreducible core truths. Moving right along to Section 4, Calculating the Odds. Let's talk about navigating uncertainty. Once you finally have the ground truth, you still have to navigate uncertainty and know exactly where your limits lie. And this brings us to your circle of competence. Knowing the edge of your competency actually matters way more than the size of it. For instance, Warren Buffett admired a furniture retailer named Mrs. B. She completely dominated the furniture industry, but she fiercely, absolutely refused to touch stocks. Her narrow focus wasn't a limitation at all. It was her superpower. By narrowing your focus to areas where you have an actual track record, you maintain a genuine edge. Step outside that circle and your advantage just vanishes into thin air.
Now, inside that circle, you must use probabilistic thinking. You need to start assigning explicit confidence levels to predictions, rather than claiming absolute 100% certainty. You identify your baseline assumptions, calculate the realistic odds, and, crucially, you update your beliefs in real time as new evidence emerges. Let me give you an example. A positive pregnancy test might be heavily marketed as 99% reliable, right? But in isolation, without looking at context or the baseline rates of the population, that single number isn't the whole truth. Context always matters when you're calculating reality.
Finally, Section 5, Thinking Backward to Win, Seeing Inversion in Action.
So, to prevent the dominoes from falling in the wrong direction entirely, we use a method of subtractive thinking called inversion. Forward thinking is additive. You pile on strategies and tactics to achieve a goal. But inversion is subtractive. If you want to improve innovation, don't ask how to be more creative. Ask what kills creativity around here, and then just remove those blockers. If you want a project to succeed, ask what would cause this to completely fail, and run a pre-mortem. Honestly, exposing your blind spots and avoiding disasters is often significantly more effective than blindly piling on new, shiny strategies.
Now, as you map out these backward paths, you've got to rely on Occam's razor. Default to simplicity. When you have competing hypotheses that explain a situation equally well, always prefer the one that requires the fewest assumptions. Why? Because every single additional assumption you make is just another potential failure point in your second-order predictions. Simpler explanations are much easier to test and massively reduce your execution risk. Simplicity isn't laziness here, it is highly disciplined reasoning.
And, well, when you're looking at human behavior within those systems, you really need Hanlon's razor. When things go wrong, our brains naturally jump to assuming malicious intent. But the vast majority of problems are actually caused by highly mundane culprits: incompetence, neglect, poor incentives, or just simple miscommunication. These are the things causing most of the friction in the world, not some grand evil conspiracy out to get you. So, the absolutely crucial point here is captured in this profound truth. Never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by neglect. Assuming incompetence or simple neglect over malice immediately interrupts your own confirmation bias. It stops unnecessary conflict right in its tracks. It fundamentally shifts your perspective from being highly defensive to operating with empathy, which allows you to focus on real problem solving rather than just pointing fingers and assigning blame.
Bringing this entire toolkit together, we look to the wisdom of the great Charlie Munger. He said, "Instead of looking for success, make a list of how to fail instead. Avoid these qualities and you will succeed." It really is that straightforward. By stripping away false maps, relying on first principles, calculating the actual odds, and actively avoiding the paths that guarantee failure, you just naturally clear the way for success. Avoiding stupidity is measurably easier and for sure much more effective than constantly trying to seek pure genius.
Which brings us right back to you. I want you to mentally look at the absolute biggest decision sitting on your desk right now. You know the one that's weighing on you, the one you are just about to pull the lever on. You probably already know what the immediate result will be, but I want you to look past that first-order trap, apply these models we've talked about, and ask yourself, and then what?